Welcome to Excel 2. In today's class, we will be learning how to create links, design and implement formulas, and generate charts based off of data tables. These topics are more advanced than those presented in Excel 1, but they're being presented in an introductory way intended for users new to Excel. Students who learn best by working through examples are encouraged to play along on their own, either using the exercise file we'll be working with that is provided on the Bloomingdale Library's website, that's mybpl.org, or using a blank spreadsheet and creating their own examples. For those who prefer to just watch and listen, that is completely fine as well. I will be demonstrating on Excel 2016, but everything done in class today will work with Excel 2019, 2013, 2010, or 2007, though you may see some small differences in appearance of the ribbon or menus that appear. For those using the cloud version of Excel, that's Office 365, some of the menu options suggested may not be available to you, but everything done in the main spreadsheet will work the same way. With all that said, let's get started learning about links. Our first exercise today is learning about links, learning what they are and how to work with them, how to create them in other places and how to edit them, and why you would go about doing that. Before I do that, I do want to show you a little bit of information about what we're looking at on the screen here. I have a number of worksheet tabs at the bottom. You can see Data, Link, Exercise 2, Exercise 3, Exercise 4, and Table. All of these are names that were assigned by me. None of them have any particular meaning, although I guess you can infer that Exercise 2 will be part of the second exercise we do, and so on. None of these words are magical or have any meaning to Excel. So when you create these on your own, you can name them whatever you like. I'll mention when I'm talking about formulas some recommendations as to what are good and bad ideas for worksheet names. You'll see examples of both of those in what I've already created here. But I just want to make that clear as we're going through this. We're going to be using a number of these tabs for a number of different things as we go, and I want you to understand that the names are arbitrary and you would name them whatever is appropriate for your work or your information that you're recording. Now, this first tab that I have that is labeled Data has a very straightforward little spreadsheet here that is listing programs here at the library, their participation numbers, and then at the bottom is totaling them up. If you watched the video for our Excel 1 class, you would have seen a demonstration of how to create a function like this, where we're adding together a group of numbers. If you didn't, that's completely okay. We will be doing that example later on in class today and expanding on it. But just to summarize quickly for you, this cell is adding together all of the numbers between G7 and G13, so that is all of these. Now, the reason that I'm explaining this is because our link is going to connect the result of this to another page. And it's important to understand that a link is not copying and pasting. Some of the processes are going to be similar. It's going to seem real close and easy to make that mistake. But when you copy and paste, you copy the contents of the cell and you paste it somewhere else. When you create a link, you are creating a tunnel between one cell to another, and so whatever appears in this one will then appear in the other one. So if I were to copy this right here and then paste it a few columns over, you see I would have copied and pasted the formula that was in this. And because Excel is clever, when it moves formulas around, it automatically changes the cell values that are put in the arguments here from G7 through G13 to K7 through K13. And so we see it is now adding together these numbers and getting 0. However, if I created a link, it would just show me what was in that cell right now, and as the value changed, the result of the link would change too. I could come here and I could delete this. That has no effect on this cell because I copied and pasted it. I did not create a link. Sometimes copying and pasting is the appropriate choice. Other times you want the link because you want to pull information in. So that begs the question, how do we create a link? Multiple ways to do this. I'm going to show you what I believe to be the most straightforward one first, and that is we highlight the cell or group of cells that we want to create a link to, and we click Copy. If you prefer to use Control-C or any other copy method, that works perfectly fine. Then we go to the destination where we want to create this link. Usually it will be in a different worksheet in the same file. I mentioned in the handout, if you happen to have downloaded that you can create links to entirely different files. There are some situations where that's appropriate, but if at all possible, I would encourage you to avoid that. It creates a lot of opportunity for error because Excel is not smart enough to understand when files are moved to a different location or they are renamed or the source content is damaged in some way. It will cause problems with your formulas later on. And so try to avoid doing things from file to file if you can. but if you need to, the process works the same way that we are doing it here. So I copy the cell or group of cells that I want to link, and then I go to the destination where I want it to appear. Now here I did a very simple example. I just called a tab link, and I want to have this appear right there. That doesn't seem all that helpful or productive. In a lot of situations where you wanted to create a link, you would be pulling information from a number of different worksheets and putting it in one central place, so you could just check one place and see all the results. In other situations, you would be taking the information that you want to link and having it connect to a lot of different locations. So if you wanted to update something on one page and have all of your employees see it on their worksheet, you could change it in one master tab, and then everything else would be changed appropriately. So there are a lot of different ways that we would use this. We're just doing this as a basic example right now of pulling information from this cell and putting it in this one. Now, some of you might think that we would paste here. That would create an error because that would be attempting to copy and paste the formula from one place to another. Why it would generate an error in this situation, I'll explain later when I'm going over formula errors that can come up. But what I want to show you for creating the link, instead of clicking on the paste button, we go to the pull down arrow underneath it and we choose paste special. Now before I click on that, I will mention that some of you that are familiar with this probably know that there are shortcuts available. I could slide right up onto this paste link option and that would create the link there. The reason I'm going to the paste special button is because I want, number one, you to see this entire window and all the choices that are available with it. And the second reason is those of you using older versions of Excel might not have that shortcut available. And so I want to have that available for anybody that uses any version of Excel. They can go to Paste Special and they can see these choices. Now, if you haven't used the Paste Special menu before, this is giving you options that you can do with the content that you are copying and pasting in. Some of these are more useful than others. You can see you can just copy the formulas. So maybe you have a large spreadsheet with a lot of content on it, but you just want to grab all the formulas out of there and put it in a new one, and then you want to put new data in. You could, instead of having to highlight all the individual cells that have formulas, you could highlight the entire thing, but say just copy the formulas. On the other hand, say you wanted to pull the value out of the result of a formula and you didn't want to copy the formula from one place to another, you just wanted to grab the value, you have that option here in the Paste Special as well. Just grabbing the formats would take on the appearance of the page without any of the content that's in it, so all of the color coding and spacing and fonts and all that stuff that you set up. Comments would grab any comments that are added in. That's something that's usually used in collaborative work when you have multiple people putting different comments in. Validation would take any of the data validation rules. That's a little bit beyond the scope of today's class. I talk about that in my Excel formulas class, but you can use validation to control what people are allowed to enter into different cells. So you can have them only entering in dates or certain size numbers or certain kinds of text, etc. So those are options for Paste Special that you might use, and there are some more details and some more options available there, formulas and number formats, values and number formats, etc. If you're pasting the entire thing, you can do operations to the data that you're bringing in. So that means you can, say, take a percentage of the data by either multiplying or dividing by a different number. You can add or subtract something to the data. If you wanted to make adjustments for things, you can do that as things are copied and pasted in. You can also do some little options like skipping any blank rows. So if you have a spreadsheet that you have deleted a lot of records from, you can copy the entire thing and you can skip the blanks as you go through there to clean it up a little bit and save yourself some time. That can be a very helpful tool. You can also transpose. That means changing the rows and columns as you go through. I've never had cause to do that, but that option is available for you there. So these are all kinds of things that Paste Special provides. I just like to make you aware of that because it is a very useful tool. For today's purposes, though, when we are creating links, all that we'd want to do is click Paste Link. So I click that, and there we go. Now, I was talking for a while there, so it made it seem like a longer process than it was. Let's go ahead and do that from scratch. So I'm going to simply delete what's typed in, go back to the data worksheet. I would copy what I want to paste a link to, go to the destination, make sure the cell is in the right place, Paste Special, Paste Link, and we are done. So it doesn't take all that much to do once you know that it's there. Now, when we're looking at the worksheet here, we see the result of the paste link right there in cell B1. We can see 2,927, and if I go back to data, you can see 2,927. The interesting thing with this is that if I come here and I type in for the computer course, 107 people, not only does the number change there, but it also changes here, because this cell, if you look at the formula bar up here at the top, you can see equals that cell back here. You see it says equals data exclamation point $G $15. Now, for those of you who haven't seen anything like this before, I'm going to give a quick explanation, and we'll see more details on this later on when we're working with formulas. The equal sign is how you begin every formula. Any kind of calculation that Excel does is always going to start with an equal sign. I'm going to repeat that exact same thing in a few minutes when we're talking about formulas, because it's a very important point that is often missed. Next to that, we see the word data. That is the name of the worksheet. Excel only knows to look for the name of a worksheet because it's followed by the exclamation point. That exclamation point says, hey, find a worksheet with the name that was typed right in front of me, and so it looks and it finds data. After that, you are getting a cell reference, G15. That is this cell right here, column G, row 15. The dollar signs in front of the G and in front of the 15 mean that if this formula is copied and pasted somewhere else, it will not change which cell it is referring to. Remember back here when we copied and pasted the formula over to here and it automatically adjusted it for us from G to K because we moved over? Most of the time we want that. Usually when we are reusing formulas, we want it to adjust to the new location and work with the data that is available there. But sometimes you want a fixed address. You want a fixed cell reference that is not going to change, and for that, you use the dollar signs. So that's how we create the basic link by copying and pasting. This, as I said, I believe to be the most straightforward way to do it. It's the least likely to create errors, but there are other ways that you can go around this option and simply type that in, and we will see those when we're working with formulas. Finally, in case you're looking in your spreadsheet or the handout that I gave you, you will see some references to when you copy and paste to an entirely different file. It will ask you when it opens up, do you want to update links from other workbooks? What that's saying is if this was going not to another worksheet in the same file, but to an entirely different workbook, which is what Excel refers to its files as, it would have to, every time you opened it, check the target of that link and see is there any new information there. And so it would pop up a question asking, do you want to update links to workbooks? You would say yes to that because the whole point of the link is to get the new information that's available to you. So you would say yes, and the information would appear. If by chance something had happened to the workbook since last you had used this, and all of your data was corrupted and damaged, and you didn't want to save that, the solution would be to close the file and not save the changes. Of course, for those of you that use Office 365, you might know that's not an option with that because Office 365 changes things dynamically, continuously. That's part of working on the cloud. But that is something that you'd be a little bit less likely and a little bit more cautious in using when working with cloud resources, creating these links between them, because that is very vulnerable to that kind of damage. So that's one of the reasons that I recommend against creating those links. The main one, though, is that the link is often lost if the file is moved or renamed. So you want to be very careful about that. It's a lot of opportunity for error. However, within the same file and linking between worksheets is a hugely valuable resource that I strongly recommend and that I use in just about every at all advanced worksheet that I create. So definitely practice creating these or typing them into the formulas as I'm about to show you. Now, as we go to work on formulas, I want to go over a number of the rules associated with creating formulas, and then we will create several of these things ourselves. I will be demonstrating examples of these rules and what happens when you don't follow them a little bit to the right of the exercise 2 that I plan on working with here, and then we will go through actually performing exercise 2 on the screen. So I'm just grabbing some blank columns to the side here and typing along as I make these explanations. The first rule that I provide is that all formulas begin with an equal sign. What that means is that Excel doesn't know to calculate something unless you start it with an equal sign. So I can say equals 2 plus 2, and Excel will tell me 4. But if I just type 2 plus 2, Excel does nothing. So whenever you are looking to add anything together, perform any kind of function, any kind of formula, you will always begin it with an equal sign. However, you want to, in almost every situation, only have the one equal sign. I will be showing you later on how you can have multiple functions within a formula, and sometimes people will make the mistake of putting an equal sign at the beginning of more than one of those functions. What that will do is it will treat the second equal sign as a comparison in the middle of the formula. So it'll be asking equals 2 plus 2 equals 3 times 4, and it will say false because those are not equal to each other. And you might be wondering what happened there. I wanted to add all of those things together. You'll see clearer examples when we're working with inserting multiple functions as part of our formula a little bit later on. So we'll come back to that. But just remember, you always begin with an equal sign, but after that first equal sign, any one that you use in the formula is used as a tool of comparison, asking if things are true or false, if they are equal to each other. Now, the next formula rule that I give is that formulas can use cell references and or real numbers in their calculations. That means that I could type, as I did, equals 2 plus 2, or I could type equals b2 plus b3, or equals 451 plus 80. And you see, those two get the same result. One has cell references, one has static numbers, and you can mix and match. You can say equals b2 plus 80, and that still works just fine. So you can use the cell references or you can use the numbers in them. Generally speaking, whenever possible, we want to use cell references. There are a few advantages to this. For one, it's more dynamic. It allows us to make changes and have the formula automatically update. So if I go back here and I say, actually, we had 82 people for chess club, you can see the one that uses cell reference B3 automatically changes, but the two that said 80 do not. So using the cell references makes your formulas more dynamic, and it prevents you from having to go back and reuse work. It also allows you to reuse the formulas. So the one that says equals B2 plus B3, I can copy and paste that 2 rows over, and suddenly it's adding together D2 and D3. But this, if I copy and paste it, it's still adding those numbers. So by using the cell references, you made it so that you can reuse your formula for multiple columns or multiple rows, depending on how you're setting things up. Finally, it's often clearer to read when you see these cell references there rather than the numbers. It can be hard to keep track of, hey, where did these numbers come from if you just see 451 and 80 typed in. But if you see the cell reference, you can find that in the spreadsheet and you can see what it's referring to. So that can be a lot clearer for somebody else coming and working with your product later on. So you can use static numbers or, by the way, static text for formulas and functions that work with text, but whenever possible, try to use those cell references. Now, the next rule that I have is the mathematical operators that Excel recognizes are the plus for addition. You've seen me type that in several times. The minus for subtraction, so I could say equals B2 minus B3. The asterisk for multiplication, so I could say equals 2 times 3. The forward slash for division, so I can say equals 9 divided by 3. Tells me 3. The caret for exponentiation, so I could say equals 10 to the third power, and that's 1,000. And the percentage sign equals 92%. And that changes it to 0.92. So any of those symbols as typed in, Excel will automatically recognize them and work with them. You can, and this is the next rule that I have, use parentheses to override the order of operations. So for anybody that's not familiar with it, the order of operations in a mathematical formula is first you do exponentiation. So any power that something is raised to, that happens first. Second, you do multiplication and division, reading from left to right. And finally, you do addition and subtraction, reading again from left to right. You can control that using parentheses. So if I want to take the average of 5 numbers, say I have the attendance here, and I want to figure out the average. Yes, some of you might be familiar with the fact that there's an existing function that does the average, but this works well for the demonstration here. So I could say equals B2 plus B3 plus B4 plus B5 plus B6 plus B7 plus B8 divided by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And that tells me 1,218.143. That's obviously not the average of them. What happened there is This first did the division of B8 divided by 7, and then it added together all the numbers, because that's the order of operations. That's how that is supposed to work. But if I go in here and I change this by putting parentheses around all the numbers being added together first, and then press enter, then it gives me an average 178.4286 that's actually somewhere in the middle of all these numbers, and thus is most likely correct. So that's how you use parentheses to control what order things happen in. This is particularly important in a lot of financial formulas that you'll work with. If you're, say, calculating a mortgage or compounding interest over time for an investment, you might need to use these parentheses to control what order the numbers work with each other. So be aware of that. Now, some of this you've seen already, but I mentioned here, after a formula is entered, you'll see the formula in both the formula bar and the cell where you entered it, and you can see the formula, and you can edit the formula in either location. What I mean by that is you see the result on the spreadsheet, but whenever you highlight a cell, you see the formula listed up here in the formula bar. If you want to make changes like I just did, you can either double-click on the cell itself and using the arrow keys and the backspace and delete keys type in the changes here, or you can click in the formula bar at the top and make your changes there. Notice that Excel from 2003 on gives you these color codings to help you identify which cell references are connected to where as you are going through the editing process. Why would you want to edit in one place or another? Well, some people prefer the clarity of just using the formula bar at the top. It's less cluttered, you can just see the formula there and not be bothered by all the stuff that's around there, especially if you have things tightly packed on the neighboring columns. Other people, however, like to edit things within the cell so that they can see what's around it and what it's referring to. In larger spreadsheets, you can get lost sometimes in the big sea of data, and so it can be nice to be working with it within that space. One final rule or tidbit that I have related to editing and creating the formulas is that if you want to see everything that you have on your spreadsheet, all the formulas that you've typed in, you want to see them all at once, not the results of them, but the actual formulas, you can do that by pressing the Control button and the tick key on your keyboard. The tick key is not to be confused with the single quote key. The tick key is above the tab key and to the left of the number 1 on the main keyboard, not on the number pad. So I press those keys, and you can see, first of all, the first thing you notice is everything stretches out. But then if I scroll to the right, you see all of the formulas as typed out here. So this is showing you everything that was typed in. Why would you want to do that? Of course, this isn't how you would want your spreadsheets to look most of the time. But you would do this from time to time if you wanted to be able to quickly find any formulas that were written in the spreadsheet here. So maybe if this was somebody else's work and you're trying to figure out where the numbers come from, this can be a way to find any formulas that were written and what they're referring back to. Another reason that you might want to do this is if you want to reproduce a formula somewhere else in your spreadsheet and you need to create something fairly complicated or just get some ideas off what you've done before. Say you've learned a little bit more about this, maybe you watched the video on Excel formulas and you're creating elaborate if formulas or some VLOOKUPs that are long and complicated, and you want to kind of steal off that, but you don't want to have to keep going back and forth. You can do Control-Tick to make it visible for a while you are typing something else in, and then once you are done, you press Control-Tick again. This is a toggle, so you turn it on by pressing it and you turn it off by pressing it, and that makes things back to normal. If you are ever looking at a spreadsheet and the formulas don't seem to be calculating, they're just showing you what you typed in there, one thing you can try is pressing Control-Tick to see if maybe somebody left it in the formula reveal mode like that, where they're showing everything that's there instead of showing you the results. So that's just a useful little tool, and occasionally a problem solver when people have changed something without your knowledge on the formula. So those are some basic rules for how formulas work. Later on, we'll talk about error values that can come up when creating formulas, but I do want to, before we finish this exercise here, show you how to insert functions and then how to simply type them in yourself. For those of you that watched the Excel 1 video, or have just done this on your own, you might know that you can insert functions using the menus by going to the Formulas tab, not the Insert tab, it's a little tricky with that. You go to Formulas, and then the first thing you see on the left is Insert Function. When I click this, I get the option of finding functions in two different ways, either by searching for a function here or choosing a category and looking for the available options. I do want to point out, after this has appeared, if you look to the left, I did make sure to highlight the cell that I wanted this function to go in before I went to the insert function menu item. That's a very common mistake. Make sure that you have highlighted the correct cell. So if you accidentally did not do that, you simply cancel out of here, go back and click on the cell you want this to be in, and then click Insert Function. Now, once you are here, you can type in a description of the function that you want or go to the category. Most of the time, I find the categories to be a little bit more efficient. When I type in the descriptions, it doesn't always get exactly what I want, but if you're not sure what category to go with, typing something in and searching for it there might be the way to go. In this case, most recently used will work because I simply want to use the sum function, and that is the most commonly used function there is. However, if I wanted to find something that was a little bit less common, I might go to, say, math and trig, and then search through until I found, there's what I'm looking for, the sum function. Once you highlight what you want, it will show you a brief description of the function down here at the bottom, which says sum number 1, 2, adds all the numbers in a range of cells, and then I can click help on this function, and it will pop up more details if that's necessary. In this case, the sum function is relatively self-explanatory, so we probably don't need this, but some more elaborate functions aren't always clear what order they want you to enter the information in or what exactly they're doing based on their name, and so the help on this function can be a very useful tool in helping you select which ones you want. Once I've got the function I want, I click OK. It's now asking for the arguments. If you're not familiar with that term, the arguments are the information that you put into a function to get a result. In this case, it will guess what the arguments are. Excel will always guess. Sometimes it gets it right, sometimes it doesn't. In this case, it got it mostly right. It said B2 colon B9. The colon indicates a range. That means that it will get all the cells in between these two, including the ones listed. So sort of the bookends, the starting and the ending cell, are also included in the range that it is grabbing. Now, we could go with B2 through B9, and that would be just fine. B9 is a blank cell, so it's just adding a 0. But if you wanted to be precise, you could change this and say B2 through B8. And that way it would get only the cells indicated there. Once you have what you want, you can click OK. If you're wondering what this number 2 option is, that's if you wanted to add another range of cells or individual cells that was not connected to the first one. So you might say, number 2, we're adding 7 numbers already. No, this is just a second group of numbers that you would put in. So if I wanted to add in the nighttime attendance here, I could type in D2 colon D8, and then it would get another range. And as soon as I typed that in, you see it puts in a number 3, giving me the option to keep adding more and more ranges of cells. For right now, I'm not going to add that in, so I will just leave that blank and click OK. And you see the result of the function and formula appears right there. And if we look at the formula bar at the top, you see that Excel automatically put in the equal sign because all formulas begin with an equal sign. Then it typed the name of the function that we chose, the sum function. Very often when I'm teaching these classes, I say things like I did earlier with these worksheet names. I say there's nothing magical about these names. It doesn't matter. It's just what I called it. In this situation, this is something magical. This is a specific function name that is built into Excel, and it recognizes these letters and it knows what those mean when followed by parentheses. So in this case, it does have to be exactly that. If you typed out summation, it wouldn't work. If you misspelled sum, it wouldn't work. It has to be exactly right. I mention this because I'm going to show you in just a moment that you don't always need to go through the insert function option. You can simply type in what you want there. Now, once I have that typed in, we see in the arguments the B2 colon B8 that we typed in there, and then the closing parentheses afterwards. So the parentheses grab that, and all the information that's there is tossed into the function and gives you the result. The sum function is a relatively easy function because it doesn't matter what order the numbers are put in. After all, 3 plus 4 equals the same thing as 4 plus 3, so you can put things in whatever order you want. It's pretty straightforward. Other more complicated functions give a specific order that you need to put the arguments in. We'll see that later when we talk about VLOOKUP. So once you've created the function, now that you know that, you can, especially if you're more of a keyboard person, simply type it in yourself and get the results that way. And that gives you the flexibility to create things like this, where you have equals the sum of B2 colon B8 plus the sum of D2 colon D8. So you see I am combining multiple functions here within one formula. It's just one formula. It has the equal sign at the beginning, but then I have the multiple functions combined there to get the result that I want. And then if I'm really getting ambitious, I can continue on and I can add in a reference to another worksheet. So I wanted to show you how to keep growing with this and adding more and more. When we're typing in our formulas, I could add just plus H12 if I wanted. I can grab something else within this worksheet, but if I wanted to, I could do a reference to the data tab that I had at the beginning. Now, if you've looked over the handout that comes with this class or you have some experience with this, you might know that you can simply type in the worksheet name like we saw before. I could type in data, exclamation point, $G, $15, and that will work. That gives us the result that we want. That's great. However, what I'm going to recommend to you is instead of typing that in, we're going to use our mouse, because typing that in creates all kinds of opportunities for error. Notice as I take my mouse and I click here, it fills in the worksheet name for us. So if we didn't remember the worksheet name, or if it was longer or harder to type, that would take care of filling it in for us. And then I click on the cell that I want, and it fills that in for me as well. You notice that it didn't put the dollar signs in. I can always go back and add that myself later on if I want to. But if you have not gone through this many times like I have, you might not know that G15 is the cell there, so you might not have that memorized. This fills all that information in for you. I simply press enter when I'm done, and it jumps me back here with that already entered in. And now if I wanted to make sure that it stayed locked in, I could put in the dollar signs in front of that, and that way I could copy and paste it and nothing would be lost. So that's how we can have multiple parts within one formula. If you think of each of these as its own number that you're adding together inside of one formula, this number is just one item that is calculated by the function that is built into it. And so is this one. And this is a cell reference that goes back to another location that is calculated there as well. So we can use tools like this to make our formulas grow and to consolidate more and more information so it's faster and easier to find. Having talked about how we put all these formulas together, the next thing that I want to go over is problems that can come up when you are making the formulas. Now, in demonstrating the error values that come up, I will be typing something onto the screen and trying to create the error as I explain it. Some of these I will describe and I will show workarounds and ways that you can avoid them. Others I'll just explain what it might mean when that comes up. We'll see how this works as we go. Now, first thing that I want to show you is the error that you get when the column isn't wide enough to display the value. So if I were to type in a date, and then I go and change the formatting for this. If Excel is smart enough, it will change the width for us automatically. But if the column is fixed in any way, you will get these numbers generated. Some of you that have experience with Excel might be wondering, hey, usually when things are cut off, like I just cut off there, it simply doesn't show you all of the text. Now, I don't know the reasoning behind how Excel is designed, but what's always made sense to me is that if you have text and a little bit of it is cut off, that can be a problem. It can cause a little confusion, but it's not nearly as bad as cutting off, say, 1 or 2 digits from a account balance that you're supposed to have. You know, going from 1,000 to 100 because you cut off 1 0 is a big difference, and so for formula results, it seems a little bit more crucial that it makes sure all of the information appears. So when you have any kind of calculated result, and date is the most common example of this, but you can have larger formulas that will generate numbers too big to fit in the cell as well, you will get these pound symbols indicating to you that it was unable to fit it. All you need to do for this, as you might have guessed, is simply widen the column out. Fastest way to do that is just to double click, but you can drag a little bit more if you want some extra space to be safe. And then the problem is solved. So that's an easier error message that comes up. Now let me try to generate some more of these for you. Similar to what I typed earlier, when I typed equals B2 plus B3, here I typed equals B1 plus B2, and that gave me a value error. When you get a value error, it's because the arguments of your formula, the cell references that you're putting in, or the static data, don't match what you're using to calculate the formula. So in this case, the plus symbol in between. So I was adding the word daytime attendance with the number 451, and of course you can't add a word with a number. If instead I had typed in something to concatenate two pieces of text together, that would still give us an error because you can't take the number and work it with the text formula. So anytime there's a mismatch between the values that you give it and the operation that you want to have happen, you will get a value error here, telling you that the value is wrong. Almost every time when this happens, you've simply made a typo. You grabbed the wrong cell or the wrong column. Take a look at the values that you've entered in and see what doesn't match there. If for whatever reason you look this over and you find that nope, all the cells are correct, everything should be right there, you might need to change the formatting. So this might look like a number, but you might need to highlight all the numbers and go and change the number formatting to make sure that they are simply general numbers, because somebody might have changed those to text for whatever odd reason. So every now and then that could come up, but most of the time it's just a matter of saying, whoops, I meant to say B2 plus B3, and now everything is fine and it works as intended. I'm going to go a couple rows down here because I want to show you the next one that I find to be an interesting one here, and that's the divide by zero error. Say I was calculating the amount of money made during different odd jobs. I could say job done, hours worked, pay, and then dollars per hour. And I could go through and set this up and say, okay, say I was painting and it took me 10 hours and I made $100. That equals the amount of pay, which is I-29, divided by the number of hours, which is H-29. And it gives me a result. It says $10 per hour. And I could pretty this up and change these numbers to look like currency. And you can say, okay, that works great. Now, you might say, well, okay, I'm going to save some time and copy and paste this formula on down. And as soon as I do that, all of a sudden, I've got a divide by zero error. Why did my formula work before and suddenly it's not working when I moved it down a row? Well, what happened here is you simply haven't entered in the data yet. So this situation is actually not that big of a deal. As soon as I put in some more information, it will work itself out. It's just right now you have 0 as the value here, and that makes the formula break because computers cannot divide by 0 because the answer to anything divided by 0 is infinity, and computers don't like infinity. So when you get that error, very often it simply means your data entry is not done yet. Now, if this is something that is for your own information and your own records, and you don't really care if it says divide by 0 there until you've filled in the information, then you can just leave it, no big deal. It will take care of itself as you type in the data. If, however, this is to be presented to people or your supervisor checks in on this and you want to make sure that it looks nice, then you might want to hold off on copying and pasting that down, or as you get more advanced, you can use if statements to make sure that something is typed in here first, and then once it is, then perform the divide by 0 task. So there are ways to hide this or get around it if it is a problem, but as long as you're getting the results that you want and you don't care about the appearance, you can often ignore this error. If you have the data entered in and you're still getting this error, then that indicates that there's a logical mistake in your formula as you designed it, and you might need to revisit that and take a look at how you have this set up. You might be dividing by the wrong information or have things placed in the wrong columns or rows. Finally, I want to talk about the name error that you will get. So if when I typed this in, I had said go to link, but I typed link L-I-N-C instead of L-I-N-K, it would go searching for something here, and it gives me a reference error with that. But if sorry, Excel is getting too clever for me. There we go. If I didn't have the dollar signs in there and I typed this in and I just forgot the exclamation point, then what you get is Excel looking for a name. Now, we haven't talked about this yet, but every cell in any spreadsheet has a built-in name, and that name is the column letter and the row number. We've been using those all class. You can see that name looking in the upper left here where it says H13. That is the name box, and you see that as your mouse hovers over it. If you want to change the name of any cell, I can highlight the cell and I can go to the name box and I can type in daytime attendance or whatever name I want. Note that the name has to be all one word, so no spaces or punctuation, and it has to begin with a letter. So I type daytime attendance, and then I go here and type for the name box nighttime attendance. Now, a couple key things. The original names still work. You can still refer to cell B10 and that will work fine. But you might wonder, why would you do this? Well, the reason that you would do this is now, instead of typing in sum of B2 through B8, I could type in daytime attendance, and that grabs that cell for you automatically. And not only could I do it in this worksheet, but if I go back here and I call this original data, I could change this one to original data. I can change that to nighttime attendance. And now I get the result that I want. So you see, using the names can be a way to avoid making errors. It can be a way to simplify referring to other cells. But if you type something in and you miss certain parts of it, or you type the letters or the numbers in the wrong order, like in the example that I gave, if you miss the exclamation point indicating a worksheet, it will very often think that you are referring to a name that you did not in fact create. So usually when you get the name error, that's just another indication that you made a typo. You forgot some detail of a worksheet you were linking to, or you typed in the cell reference wrong. In older versions of Excel, if you typed something like 2B instead of B2, then it would make that a name error. Now, in newer versions of Excel, it'll say, hey, did you mean to do that? And it'll change it for you automatically because people make those errors all the time, and it's gotten clever about finding that. Just like you saw it a couple of times there, I tried to fix the errors that I was trying to make automatically because Excel is getting smarter and smarter. But in older versions, you might see that name error pop up for things as simple as cell reference mistakes when you're typing them in. So if you are entering in a formula and you see that name question mark error appear afterwards, go back and take a look and see what mistake you might have made that would cause that to come up. So those are some of the most common error values that I see when helping people with this. One more thing that I want to show you is a way to check your mistakes or make sure that you're getting the right answers before you go on. So when I typed in a function here, I'm pretty confident that this worked. I've used the sum function many, many times, and I know that that is correct as typed in. But if you're new to this and you just want to double check your work before you give somebody an answer, Excel has a nice feature for you where I can simply drag my mouse across a group of cells, and if you look in the lower right, you can see down here it calculates the sum, the count of the cells, and the average. And by right-clicking on that, I can actually change what comes up. You can see right now average, count, and sum are shown. I can say give me the maximum, give me the minimum, give me the numerical count, whichever of those that I want. And then you see it tells me the largest number is 451, the smallest is 0. There are 7 of them that have numbers in them, 7 total cells highlighted. So you can get quick information by highlighting there. It's not stored anywhere, it's not permanent, but you can see sum is 2011. Oh, 2011, looks like I got it right. All right. Sum is 3260. Add those together, 3260. Looks like we got it right. So that quick little auto-calculate there can be a nice way to confirm things, or if you don't have a need for the formula result, but somebody just asks you something really quick. Say I got a phone call and somebody asked, hey, what's the average number of people that come to a nighttime attendance or nighttime program? I could highlight that real quick and say, oh, we get about 287 people per nighttime event that we've had this year. So you can get the information really quickly, even if you don't need to store it, by simply highlighting this and checking out the auto-calculated information there at the bottom. So that's a lot of information about creating formulas. Again, I would strongly encourage you to experiment and play around with this, create a lot of formulas, find some errors, find your mistakes with it. One other thing that I want to point out is you're going to learn by doing this that depending on how you want to set up the formulas, you very often need to organize your data in a way that is conducive to this. So you need to organize the data in a way that works for the formulas that you're typing in so that you can reuse formulas that you've calculated, or that it's not too confusing with the way that you're grabbing the information from one spot to another. So keep that in mind when designing your data tables in the first place. Think about what formulas am I going to need here and how do I want them to calculate. And that'll save you a lot of time redoing the work later on. Now with that, we're going to take a little break from formulas and we're going to go play with charts for a while and learn about how to generate charts with data that you have available. Before we begin creating charts, I do want to point out that my background is in computer science, and I will be explaining how to create the charts from a using Excel point of view, not from a statistician's point of view. So I'll give examples of when you might want to use one chart type or another, but for more depth on that, you would want to speak with somebody with more expertise in working with statistics. Now, I have created an example chart here, and the way that you would create any chart in Excel is you would first highlight the data that you want to have represented with the graphic. So I'm going to highlight across here. You'll see this is a make-believe chart that I created with no actual meaning to it, just arbitrary numbers assigned to computer companies here. Once you have highlighted the data that you want, you would go to Insert, and you see right in the center the Charts option. Now, those of you who have some familiarity with this, you might know that you can click on the type of chart that you want in this menu in the newer versions of Excel. In fact, Excel 2016 and 2019 have the recommended charts option that you're going to see in just a moment, which is very helpful and a quick way to get to the chart that makes the most sense for the day that you've selected. Earlier versions will not have that available, but you will still have the same kinds of charts. I want to show you everything that you can do with these, and I also want to give you tools that will apply to people working with older versions of Excel. So what we want to do is click on the little arrow to the bottom right here where it says See All Charts. Now, because this is Excel 2016, it defaults to the recommended charts, which it's suggesting the bar chart that we want to have here, or I should say the column chart. And that is what I'm probably going to go with once we've seen all of them. But first, I want to go to the All Charts tab, as this is what you would see if you're working with an earlier version of Excel. And I'm going to go top to bottom on this, just explaining what we have here. Now, a top option that's not on older versions of Excel either is the Recent choice. So this will go to charts that you have created recently in Excel. And so this is just a few different kinds that I have used working with Excel myself on this computer. We are all creatures of habit and we tend to use the same things over and over again, so this can be a nice time saver. Similar to that, but a little bit more complicated, is the templates. And right now we don't have any templates created on this computer. I will show you as we are going through this how you would create a template to reuse later on. The idea of a template is if you make the same kind of chart on a regular basis, just with different data, and you want to have all of the settings the way that you like them, you can record a template once you've created the chart that you like, and you can then come back to it and reuse it time and time again. So this can be a very nice time saver, particularly if you're in a situation where you're doing monthly or annual reports and you don't want to have to relearn how to create something or how to go through all the steps involved every single time you do that. The template can have all that for you and just throw it right into place. Now, with those first two covered, I do want to talk about the different kinds of charts they have available underneath here. Column charts are top of the list and are probably the one that you'll use most often. They're a good tool for basic comparisons, just a quick way of comparing groups of things to each other. You see we have a number of different kinds of column charts across the top. The clustered column is the one that we're familiar with, and that's what I'm going to end up selecting from my chart here as we go through it. Stacked column puts the two different categories together, and so you get a total value based on them as they're combined there. This may make more sense with some data than with others. The 100% stacked column makes everything the same height, and it just shows what percentage of the value one thing has over another. So this would be useful if you were looking at, say, the income in different offices based on sales or service, and you could see while they might have different total values, every office had the same percentage of their income was going to sales or to service, or however that broke down. And then we have 3D versions of the same things, just different ways to represent the data. These look kind of interesting and a little fancy at first. I often find them harder to read, though. So when you're looking at your data, especially when you're getting like this, it can be a lot harder to read the values of things on the 3D charts than it can be with just a basic line-by-line chart. So it all depends on what you're going for with the information, but generally you'd want to use the column charts when you are comparing different information across different categories. Line charts are good for comparing the progress of things over time. So if you wanted to show the usage of different resources that you have, or balances for different investments that you have as they are progressing over time, health metrics, people that keep track of things for maybe they have ongoing conditions such as diabetes, they need to keep track of their blood sugar over time and see how they're doing. There's a lot of different things that you can use line charts for, but generally you are checking progress on them. You will usually have a lot of data points for a line chart, not just one or two values that you are throwing in. You have a lot of data points that you keep entering and keep adding to as time progresses, and the line chart gives you an indication of that. You can see other options with this. You can have base values across the top and things changing there. The ones where they have a little dot at each data point can be a little bit easier to read and can look nice sometimes. And of course they have a 3D option, which is again fancier looking but a little bit harder to just eyeball straight away there. Underneath that we have pie charts. Pie charts are good for showing a distribution of resources, how you are spending your time, how you are balancing your budget, where things are going in what percentages. They aren't as good for things like comparison, like what we're talking about right now, but they are good for if you have a sum total of resources and you want to show how they are being spent. This is a great kind of chart for that. Of course, we have different layouts that we can do for that, different ways of handling the labeling and pulling the information out. And we have the donut chart, which is kind of an interesting version of the pie chart. Bar charts are like column charts sideways. That's really about all there is to say about them. Otherwise, they're more or less identical. Area charts are similar to line charts. They look like line charts that are filled in, but of course they overlap things in some ways, so it's more of a way to show where one item stands out from the other, so where you'd see peaks and valleys, things like that. Scatter plots are good for when you have large volumes of data and you just want to show tendencies or where things are happening more often. So if you have a lot of instances of data and you don't necessarily need to show progress over time or any kind of particular grouping, but you want to see, oh, there are a lot of things that are landing in this range up here, not as many that are down here, it can be useful for that. Surface charts can be similar to that and kind of like a 3D version of the line chart where you're measuring more than one value as it changes. Radar charts are a good way of showing emphasis. So you can show where people are stronger or weaker, things that they need to balance out and put more time or more resources into. And combo charts are really good for comparing multiple values that need to be on, say, a different axis. So that if they have a dramatically different value to them, you can use the combo charts to have a larger number here than you have over there. I'll give you a real-life example of this. We have a lot of reports that I generate every month. One of them is for website usage, and in that chart I show both the mobile and the basic website usage. We have roughly 7 times as many people use our basic website as use our mobile website, but I want to have those in the same chart so we can see if they are going up together or down together, or if one is increasing at the expense of the other. And to do that so that it's readable, I need to have the mobile website on one axis that's being judged in a 3,000 to 5,000 hits range, and the main library website on another one that is judged more in the 20,000 hits range. And so we can see their lines progressing together over time without one of them being smashed down to the bottom. I do an example of that with charts in my Excel 3 class showing how we would do these multiple axes together. You might notice that I skipped over some of these, so I don't have good real-life examples or things that you might use them for. Again, if you talk to a statistician, they could give you more values for this, or somebody perhaps that works in finance. But I would like to show just the basic types of charts and when you would use one and when you would use another, as I have seen with patrons that come in and working through everyday life. Now, for the example that I gave today, I'm going to go back to the column chart, and I'm going to select this one. Feel free to choose something different if you're playing along. And I will say OK. and it immediately inserts the chart into the worksheet that I have here. Now, a couple of things that I want to point out on the screen. First of all, our chart tools appeared up here at the top. This is a new item in the ribbon that is visible and has two different tabs in it that we're going to work with. In today's class, we're going to focus on the Design tab. In Excel 3, we do a little bit with the Formatting tab as well. I also wanted to show you this object can be dragged from place to place and moved around in here. You can also grab the dots on the side to adjust the size accordingly. Now, looking at the tools in the ribbon across the top, I wanted to go through a number of these and show you how they would change. First off, because my mouse keeps hitting it and it is the largest thing in this, I'm going to show you the chart styles right in the middle. We see a number of them available there. If I hover over it, it gives you a preview of that. If I actually click on it, it keeps the chart that style. And you see I can click the pull down arrow there and see some more options that are available. I think some of these are more readable than others. See, these are getting a little cute, but a little bit hard to read. I do rather like the appearance of these columns here, so I'm going to go with that one. But you can change these to whatever you like, and I'll show you in just a few minutes how you can change these elements individually too. You can see chart colors. You have a number of different color palettes that are available. You can scroll through here. See different options to match whatever coloring you like to go with. And next to that, we see quick layout. These are different ways of representing the information. You can see you can have the legend on the right-hand side, the axes with or without titles. You can have the legend down in the corner. Do you want to have a title at the top, legend at the top? You can bounce through all these different options. So you can have the values appear with the bars on some of these. And these are things that can be changed in the format menus as well. I'm going to stick with the basic one that I have here, but I'll slide over. That gets rid of the chart title. And that puts labels in the middle. None of these work for me as well as the first one, so I'm going to keep that. Now, as we go across here, switch row or column data. I find this to be an interesting one. When you click on that, notice right now it says Gateway, Compact Dell, HP, and these bars are indicating the service quality and merchandise quality. When I switch the row and column data, all of a sudden you have the service quality and the merchandise quality, and the bars indicate the different computer companies. So it's the same data, but it's two ways of looking at the same thing. Now, there are times when that's not just superficial, when you actually need to switch that to handle, say, the compound charts that I was talking about before. Maybe you need the values to be organized in a certain way so that you can pull out one element of that and have that be separated out onto a different column or a different axis. So sometimes this is necessary and not just appearance, but other times, like many things with the charts, it's something that you would do if you wanted to present the information in a different way. And that is the reason that we create these graphics in the first place, is to help present and convince people of what we want to using the data. And so there's nothing wrong with changing the appearance in a way that looks more suitable to your explanation or to what you're trying to present. Now, the next one that we have, select data, is best demonstrated by me adding something else here. I'll come in and type Acer. Just type in some more information there. Notice that once you are no longer selecting the chart, the ribbon item that's there goes away, but when I click it, the ribbon item comes back, and I can again go to Design, and now I would choose Select Data, and I would change this from going to C5 to going to C6. And now all of a sudden, there's another column where it says Acer. This is how we update our chart, so you don't have to recreate it every time. You can just go in and add another line of data when you have more information put in. This is particularly useful, as you might have guessed, when working with the line charts, because you're going to keep adding data as time goes by, and you want to be able to do that without re-highlighting everything or recreating all of the elements of the chart again. Next thing that I have in here is change chart type. I can click on that, and that gives me the option of going to something different if I were so inclined. It could even be something dramatically different, but that again wouldn't be appropriate for the data that I have here, so I'm going to skip that one. And then finally, we have the Move Chart option. This allows you to move this object into other worksheets instead of the one that it is, or, and I would say most importantly for this, into its own tab so it can be a standalone item. I usually don't want to have the chart just plop down in the middle of the data that I am working on there. And I like to have it just as its own tab, easier to read, and not interfering with the entering new information in for this. So I'll click Move Chart, and I'll say as a new sheet, and then you would give it a name if you wanted to. Say OK. And now we have this in its own worksheet here. So you see exercise 3 still has all the data, but this is standing all by itself here. Now, finally, before we're done with the basics of working with charts, I want to show you how you can change things within the chart itself, not using the tools at the top. You can simply left-click where they have data waiting to be typed in. So I can type in oops, don't need to press enter, you just type in computer companies, then click outside of it, or whatever the title is. Or any elements that are already filled in, you can right click on and choose format. You see here I am formatting the data series, which would mean all of the Dell company comparisons here. If I click on it slowly a second time, I can do just this data point where it will not change the other ones. So I can do things like changing the fill color to a different pattern, or a gradient, or a solid fill of a different color if I wanted to, whatever color I want it to be. And you can not only change the bars, but you can also change the plot area to something fairly obnoxious in that example. We'll do polka dots there. Change the chart area. I'll do the same thing so it doesn't stand out too much. You can click on the labels, format the axis description there. All kinds of changes that you can make. You can change the scale of this axis. Pretty much any object in here, you can right click on and choose format. Right now it's set from 0 to 9. I could set that from 2 to 9, and then it will make this look even smaller and this look even bigger. So you can adjust things however you want them to. Play around with all of these, explore. You will make some truly horrible looking charts as you change all the colors and the fills, but you can learn the tools that way and make some things that really look sharp once you get the hang of it. So those are the basics of working with charts. In the next Excel class, we talk more about the formatting tools that you have here, things like creating trend lines and working with multiple axes at the same times. That's a little bit beyond the scope of today's class, but I wanted to make you aware of it. You can see some of these in the chart elements as well, some of those items that I was talking about that you can work with here. You can add titles to the axes, create the trend lines there. So a lot of options available. We also work with different kinds of data and how to create charts there. So this is just a light introduction to it to help you create some of these on your own, have some fun with it. It's a little bit more of a creative aspect than we normally get to employ when we're working with Excel. So by all means, try that out. And now before we finish, I would like to talk about an example of a more advanced function and learn a little bit about working with VLOOKUP. In every one of my Excel classes, I like to give a little sampling of what we go on to at the next stage just to give people an idea whether they want to move on and learn more about this topic. And at the end of Excel 2, I like to show you how to work with more advanced functions. In the example of learning to work with formulas, I use the sum function as a way of demonstrating because it's the most straightforward function and most people can understand what the function itself is doing. It's just a matter of learning how to enter the information into Excel and how to control all of the formatting and getting all the details right. And I don't want people to get lost in the complex details of a larger function right at the beginning, but I do want to give you a taste for what the more complicated functions look like, and so I'm doing that here with VLOOKUP. One of the reasons that I choose VLOOKUP is that it is a very popular tool for people to use. A lot of people that are doing job hunting will come into me and say that they're expected to know how to use VLOOKUP for this interview and they want to do a quick introduction to it. And so I'm always happy to go over that with people in the lab or get them started on it. And I wanted to show it to you here so that you can have some idea what you would do with this function. It's also a very versatile tool. I'm doing one basic example here, but you can use this for a lot of different things. And in some of my other classes, I go over how you can use VLOOKUP to fill in invoices based off one bit of information. You can have a lot of things appear, and how to use it to do advanced inventorying and other tools that you might want to use as a big time saver. Now, if we look at this, I have created a little spreadsheet here where I have a teacher that is scoring her students based off of grades that they received, and it is generating a letter grade with this. If we look at the function that I wrote, I typed this in, it says equals VLOOKUP, and then in there B2, table exclamation point A2 through B6, comma 2, comma true. Now what's going on there? There's a lot happening here. When I double click on this, it's going to tell us a lot about it. So when you edit functions in versions of Excel after 2003, they give you the information about the arguments for each one that you have to enter in. The first thing that we see here is the lookup value. So this is what value are we tossing into this table to calculate a result on. That's the lookup value. And in this case, that is B2, which is this cell right here. So we are taking this number and we are throwing it into the lookup table, which is the next thing that we're going to get into. So then it says table array. An array, if you have not seen that phrase before, is a group of cells. It's essentially a chunk of cells or a table. And we're going to see an example of this in just a moment when I go to the worksheet that I named table here. I could have named this grade calculator. I could have named it whatever I wanted. I called it table for simplicity's sake. In case you find that confusing, wanted you to be aware that the name is nothing special. It's just I named it the same thing as table array there. So you see table is the name of the worksheet, exclamation point, A2 through B6. So that is the cell range that we are going to be testing this number against. Next we have the number 2, and that's column index number. So in this table, there are a number of columns, 2 of them, A and B. Which value do we want to return? We're returning the number 2, that is the second value in that column. So that's what we want to bring back, is whatever is in column B when the number matches up with that table. And then finally, range lookup. Do you want to grab numbers within a range that's provided? So in this case, we are putting in grade scores, so we want things within a certain percentage range of what's available. So yes, we want to have that be true. However, for most VLOOKUPs that you will do, if you're doing something more elaborate, like say an inventory or an invoicing system based off of a SKU number or an employee number, then you would want it to be false because you would want exact matches where it gets the exact number that you have in your records to bring back everything else. So in this case, true makes sense, but when you want exact matches, not a range lookup, you would want that answer to be false. Now, let's take a look at the table, and then we will show you how to reproduce this, and I will show you where you would want to make some changes. So we look here at the table, and we see this is pretty straightforward. I color-coded this to just make it look a little bit nicer. That has nothing to do with the functions of it. And so you see I put in some range values, 0 to 70 there, and anything that falls into that, it returns the second column showing an F. 70 to 77, or just under 78, I suppose, is D, and then C, and then B, and then A. Now, if I go back to here, I'm going to want to copy and paste this on down, but before we do, I want to go back to something that we talked about earlier in this class, and that's when you are reproducing a formula, do you want the letters and numbers to change as you are moving from row and column and so on down? Looking at this, what do we have here? What cell references could change? First off, we have B2, which is referring to the cell right here. Do we want that to change? Yes, we do. We want that to change as we go down, as we copy and paste this. So we're going to leave that the same. Next, we have table, exclamation point for that worksheet, A2 through B6. Do we want those to change as we go down? Do we want that to change to table A3 to B7? No, we don't, because the table stays in the same place even though we copy this formula on down. So I would change this by putting a dollar symbol in front of those. And you can put it in front of the letters A and B as well, just to be careful, although we're not going side to side, so that wouldn't actually affect it. Once I've made that change, I can now copy and paste this on down, and you see it automatically tosses the number into the lookup value and gets the results. And if I come here and I change that to an 85, that changes it to a B. 77, now it's a D. And so you can enter more information in here and keep generating that through. You might say, well, that's kind of silly. You could have just typed that in when you looked at the numbers. But if we wanted to expand on this, we could have these grades be something that's calculated based on a number of entries that you put in other tables, or pulls all the information together, and then it just automatically spits out a grade while she's entering in more and more homework and assignments and quizzes on other worksheets. So we can have ways to make this more functional and useful, but really the point of it in today's class is to give you a basic introduction to the idea of VLOOKUP, where you are taking a value, throwing it into a table that is stored somewhere else. It could have been within this worksheet. It could be in its own worksheet like this. I usually like to have it in its own worksheet because I feel like that's a little bit more intuitive and easier to work with. And then it brings back a result. In this case, it brings back a letter grade. In other cases, you might throw in an employee number and it might bring back their first and last name, phone number, all that information, and just generate that as you go. So really useful tool, VLOOKUP. If you're looking to learn more about Excel, that's one that I would say to definitely explore on your own and practice with. There are all kinds of videos specifically about using that function that are available on the web, and we're always happy to show you more with it and work with you more about that if you stop by the lab. With that, we're concluding our class in Excel 2 today. I hope you found this helpful. If you have any more questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. Let us know what you'd like to see more or less of. We will be doing more Excel and other classes here at the library. Suggestions for classes are welcome as well. We're trying to reach out in any ways that we can and try to bring information to you while we're all stuck at home or have a harder time coming in and doing big group programs. So thank you for your time and have a great day.